पापा मुझे रोमांटिक फिल्में पसंद है, मुझे लव ट्रायंगल पसंद है, ब्रेकअप्स और शिफॉन साड़ियां पसंद है, बरेली की बर्फी, ओ बेबी, ओके कनमनी, जब वी मेट, किसिंग बूथ पसंद।
बस! ये क्या तमाशा लगा रखा है?
हाँ, तमाशा भी पसंद है।
तगड़ी तड़क भड़क में ओले गिरे सुलगते से
मार धाड़ वाला नेटफ्लिक्स, प्यार व्यार वाला नेटफ्लिक्स। अब देखिए किसी भी डिवाइस पर सिर्फ ₹190
Good morning, everyone. Let me start the recording first. We're just starting the lecture. All right. So I hope you guys are able to hear me and able to listen to me. So before we start, do you have any questions from the previous lecture that I can address? If not, we'll continue with the new content, right? So basically, what we had looked at in the previous lecture was primarily the introduction part of the system software, right? And we said that what is the reason we need to also learn that course, right? Now we said that we will be using Ubuntu throughout the course as an operating system where we will be doing all the programming, right? So whenever we look at operating system, we need to also understand the basic architecture of the operating system so that we know how to actually do the program, right? So what we said is that you have the hardware in the center, which is what we need to program, right? Because the hardware without the software will not be able to function, right? So hardware is the central component here, and then in order to take help of that hardware or to make sure that the hardware runs the way we want, right? We have to implement something which is this outer layer, and this outer layer is basically the operating system layer, which we call kernel. So kernel is the type of modules or set of modules part of the operating system also, because that is the core code which runs the system, which ensures that the system runs, right? So this is what is implementing the memory management, the process management, the file management, and all of that, right? Now you have application program, which is your outer layer, which is what we generally tend to write. Like for example, you have a web application, or you have some Java application and so on. So all of interact from that application to the kernel, right? That is where this middle layer comes into the picture, and that is what we call shell or system calls, right? So the shell is also a layer in the operating system, but it is on top of the kernel, right? It is on top of the kernel, and so we take an advantage of the shell commands, right? Or we take an advantage of the system call. So there are two components here in this area. One component is called shell, and shell allows you to write the commands on the terminal window, on the CLI, right? Command line interface, right? So you have a command line interface where you can actually write the commands, or if you want to do the programming, if you want to call the kernel functionality within your C code, then you have to call what we call system calls. Okay, what we call system calls. So if you would have studied, let's say, any basic programming course like C programming or something, you would have seen that we make a call to, let's say, for example, in the file management area, right? You open a file, right? When you open a file, you have to call some function, and that function is actually part of the kernel. It is a system call function which you are calling to open the file. So you're basically instructing the operating system that you want to open this particular file which is located at this place, right, in your file structure, right? So such things can be done, and that is this middle layer is what is important to communicate between the application program and the kernel, right? So that is what we need to really understand. Now I'm going to cover a little bit about the Unix, Linux basic commands, and the same commands actually work also in Ubuntu, because as I said, Ubuntu is actually built on top of Linux, right? So the Linux was built on top of Unix, Ubuntu is built on top of Linux, right? So the commands that we are going to go through here, they will work also in Ubuntu. So first of all, if you have installed the VirtualBox with virtual machine, right, you would basically see Ubuntu installed like this, right? If you go to the Moodle page, which I have asked you guys to enroll into, right? I've actually added a couple of more files here. So in the previous lecture, I told you that I have added an instruction to install the Ubuntu on the virtual machine, which I hope everyone is able to do. Other thing that I had mentioned, that we can actually share, right? We can share the files from the host operating system to the guest operating system. So for example, in my computer, what I have done is I actually have all the files that I want to use in my guest operating system. It is actually located in this folder. So I have a VirtualBox folder in my Windows machine, and I have a shared file folders, shared file folder here, which basically has all the code that I want to actually use in my Ubuntu, which is my guest operating system. So in order to do that, if you look at the instruction, I've shown you how to create that shared folder here, right? So once you create the shared folder here, in this option of the Oracle, VM VirtualBox, you will get this name called shared files. So shared files is the name of the is the name of the folder, which is basically pointing to your host folder. So you see that I have given the path to my host operating system folder, and I've given this as a nickname. So this is kind of like a nickname, or a short name assigned to this particular path. And then what I need to do is that using this particular folder, using this particular name, I need to actually access those files in my Ubuntu folder, Ubuntu operating system. So in order to do that, what I need to do is I need to run some command. Okay, and what is that command? So that command is what I have provided you in this shell file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open that file for you so that you know what that command is. So basically we have to run something called as mount command. Okay, so what the mount command does, it takes the a nickname that we have provided to the folder which is sitting in our host operating system to so it is basically mapping this folder to the folder in my guest operating system. So this is where the folder is created in the guest operating system. Home Ubuntu 20SP, this is my home folder, right? So this is my home directory. So home directory is nothing but the /home folder /user ID. So whatever is your login user ID that you have used, this is my home folder. Okay. So by default, when you open your terminal window or your command line window, it by default goes to this particular folder. In that folder, I have created a new directory called host files. Okay. So what I'm basically saying is that whichever path this particular acronym or this particular name is pointing to in my host operating system, I want that path to be mapped to this path in my guest operating system. Okay, that is what I'm saying. I want the read and write access both, and that access should be given to this particular user ID. Okay, so whichever user ID that you create in your virtual machine, that is the user ID you should use here. So in short, this script is created and I do use it, and that is the same script I have provided in the Moodle also, and that is what this script is, right? So basically what will happen is that once you have your shared files nickname established in your virtual machine, you will be able to use that script to actually then create a link, right, from your guest operating system that will point to the files on your host operating system. And so what the advantage we will get? The advantage will be that we will be able to use the files, we will be able to store the files in our host operating system, but then we will be able to access those files also in the guest operating system. So for example, now if I go to the terminal window, or maybe here, right, I have a host files folder here. If I go into this file, in this folder, you can see that I see these folders, right? And why these folders are there? These folders are exactly the same folders which we are looking at in our host operating system here. So you see in the shared files, I have AIPOS, IBM PISA, OpenMP, and so on. And the same folders you will be able to see here, right? And they are exactly the same folder. They are pointing to the same folders. And all the files that we are going to use in our course is actually located here. So in short, the advantage is that you have the files stored on your host operating system, but then you can access them in the guest operating system. And why we are doing that? We are doing that so that in case, in the future, if your virtual machine gets corrupted, right, in case your virtual machine gets corrupted, you don't lose the files. That's the primary reason we are doing that. Okay. So now, once you have your VM up and running, you obviously log into your local computer using the user ID and the password, like we always do. If you want to connect to the remote machine, also there is a way to do that. But that I will show you once we, go a little bit further into the course. If you want to know what is the current logged in user, you can use this particular command, right? Who am I? So who am I is the command on the terminal window that you can type. That will basically tell you what is the user that is logged in. If you want to change the password, you can use this particular command. For getting the help for the commands, right, or the system functions. So some of the system functions that we will use, or the commands that we will use, if you want to know the additional details, right? So for example, you may know the name of the command, but maybe you don't know all the functionality that that command offers. Okay, how do I get the information about that? So for that, there is a man command. That is a common command that is used to get help, right? Help for other commands or system functions, right? Man basically is the short name for manual. Okay, so this is a manual command, and it provides the manual for the other commands. So for example, if I type something like man, who am I? Right? It will basically tell me. It's a textual format, and most of the terminal window commands usually work with the CLI textual format. So if you're not familiar with this kind of environment, you will have to sort of get used to it, right? Because when you work on Linux, Unix in the system area, you will definitely have to work with the command line interface. Right, that is a very powerful interface actually for Ubuntu and Linux-based environment. So most of the time we will be actually working with terminal window. Okay. So as you can see, it says who am I is basically printing the effective user ID. What is the effective user ID? Meaning that what is the current logged in user ID. Okay, so that is what the command is supposed to do. If I let's say type some other command which I am familiar with. For example, ls. ls is the command that lists the directories and files. Okay, so ls command, it will tell you that what the command does, right? And then there are a lot of other information that you can use. So for example, there are a lot of switches, right? So these are called switches or options, right? So you have a lot of options that you can provide with the ls command, right? So for example, one of the options that I use is called L option, lowercase l. So what the lowercase l does, it provides the long listing format. Okay, long listing format. And what that is, let me show you as an example. So let me open another terminal window. Okay, so let's say if I just do ls, right? So ls will give me only the file names like this, right? So these are the file names. But if I do ls minus l, right, then you see what am I getting? I'm getting a lot more information here in the listing than just the file names. So this is basically what is known as long listing, right? Long listing. So it basically has an information about the permission. It has an information about the owner, the user who is the owner of the file. Okay. It also has the information about the size of the file. It has an information about the last access, right? When was this file last accessed, and so on, right? So that is the kind of information that you can get when you use the -l option. So there are many other options, as I say, that are available in the ls command. So whenever you are, whenever you know the command name, but you want to know what are all the different options that are available, right, that you can use with this command, you can check those out using the man command or a manual command, right? So that is what we can do. We can also check for some of the function information. For example, if I want to know what fopen does, fopen is one of the functions that we use to open the file. Okay, so fopen is the function, and so it says that you have to use this header file, and the syntax of that function is this, and these are the parameters that you can pass, and so on, right? And then what are the different options that you can again provide in the function. So all the details about these functions is given in this man command, by this man command. Right? So man command is actually very powerful. If you know the name of the function, or if you know the name of the command, then you can type that after, followed by man, and then you will get a lot of the details about the commands. There are various editors which are there. There are some non-GUI editors. If you want to try them out, you can. But I generally tend to use the GUI-based editor because we have